Imagine this. Hundreds of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, screaming through the night sky, not to drop bombs, not to engage enemy fighters, but to create a wall of sound, light, and raw presence so overwhelming, it hid an entirely different mission in plain sight. This is the story of the Sonic Shield, and why it changed everything during the Venezuelan capture. Most people think modern naval power is still about stealth and silence. They're wrong. In January 2026, the US Navy proved something profound. Sometimes the best way to disappear is to become impossible to ignore. For Navy enthusiasts, strategy watchers, and everyone who respects the men and women who serve at sea, this one is for you. Because what happened off Venezuela wasn't just another high-risk operation. It was a masterclass in 21st century naval dominance. Here's what almost no briefing mentions. While the world watched the headlines about a daring raid, the real enabler wasn't on the ground with the special operations teams. It was well offshore in the Caribbean, aboard a carrier pushing her air wing to the absolute limit. A carrier that turned sustained tempo into tactical invisibility. But how exactly did they do it? How does non-stop flight operations create a shield instead of just noise? And what did it feel like for the sailors who made it happen? Stick with me, because in the next few minutes, you're going to understand why this single concept, the Sonic Shield, may have just rewritten the rules of power projection in our hemisphere. 022. In this episode, how a carrier's non-stop roar became the ultimate cloak for one of the boldest captures in recent history. The single engineering upgrade that made it all possible, and why America's adversaries never saw it coming. And what it really cost the sailors who kept that shield alive, for days on end. You're not going to believe how they pulled this off. This didn't start in January 2026. The seeds of the Sonic Shield were planted years earlier, in the hard lessons learned from intense Western Pacific operations. As China pushed anti-access strategies and Russia tested hybrid tactics closer to home, US Navy planners quietly asked a dangerous question. What if the next fight isn't in the open ocean, but right in our own backyard? By late 2025, intelligence had confirmed high-value targets operating with state-level protection along the Venezuelan coast, targets whose removal would disrupt major transnational threats. But any conventional approach risked escalation, civilian exposure, or political disaster. So the Navy turned to an old truth, updated for the 21st century. Sometimes the loudest presence becomes the perfect mask. The concept wasn't entirely new. Carrier strike groups have long used sustained air operations to dominate airspace and confuse adversaries. But in this operation, they weaponized it. They called it the Sonic Shield. Not stealth through silence, but dominance through deliberate, overwhelming presence. Pay close attention here. This was about more than jets. It was about rewriting the detection equation in a literal environment packed with air defense networks, small boat swarms, and international observers. While diplomats talked and satellites watched, the USS Gerald R. Ford and her escorts had been positioned in Caribbean waters since mid-November 2025. A strike group already battle-hardened by more than 6 months of continuous deployment. Her air wing began a grueling cycle of continuous flight operations. Launches, recoveries, tanking runs. Through every watch rotation, the roar of afterburners and constant radar signatures created a massive electromagnetic and acoustic wall. The kind of noise that makes an adversary's sensors scream and miss the quiet moves happening in the shadows. These sailors didn't just fly missions. They became the shield itself. But what almost no one understood at the time. This wasn't just about hiding one raid, it was about proving a new model of power projection, one that keeps escalation ladders closed while delivering precision results. And it worked. Perfectly. Once. But the Sonic Shield wasn't born from instinct. It was built, piece by piece, system by system, into the most coordinated act of acoustic deception in modern naval history. Here's exactly how. The Sonic Shield wasn't magic. It was engineering pushed to the edge. At its core stood the USS Gerald R. Ford, the Navy's most advanced carrier. Her electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, stores and rapidly releases electromagnetic energy for each launch. delivering higher sortie rates with significantly less mechanical stress on airframes than the legacy steam catapults it replaced. That single upgrade changed everything. This is the layer most analysts overlook. F-35 Charlies up front, silent, invisible, lethal, Super Hornets on strike and escort, EA-18 Golf Growlers burning through enemy radar frequencies like they weren't there, and above it all, the E-2 Delta Advanced Hawkeye, the airborne nerve center that saw everything, told everyone, missed nothing. But the Ford wasn't alone. Operation Absolute Resolve drew on over 150 military aircraft launched from 20 bases across the region. Bombers, Air Force fighters, and platforms operating far beyond the carrier's horizon all converged on the same objective. The sonic shield was the carrier's piece of that puzzle, and it was the loudest piece of all. By maintaining around-the-clock operations, the strike group flooded the electromagnetic spectrum with radar emissions, engine noise, and infrared signatures. A wall of electronic presence so dense it overwhelmed everything in its path. Venezuelan air defense networks, including Russian-supplied S-300 systems, some of the most capable in the hemisphere, couldn't separate real threats from the noise, and that was exactly the point. The Ford's radar suite and integrated combat system, unique among all active carriers, handled real-time deconfliction of dozens of simultaneous aircraft while selectively amplifying certain signatures to keep adversary operators guessing. They weren't just confusing the enemy, they were blinding them on purpose. Every launch, every recovery, every tanking mission served the shield. It held through every hour of the operation. But what did sustaining this technological marvel actually demand from the sailors on board? That's where the human story becomes even more impressive. If you're proud of what these sailors do, stay right here. Because now it gets real. The sonic shield didn't just demand machines. It demanded everything from the men and women who kept it alive. You're about to see what days of sustained combat tempo really cost. Measured not in sorties, but in the people behind every single one. Now comes the part most people never see. While the sonic shield roared above the Caribbean, nearly 4,500 sailors aboard the Ford were fighting their own battle, against time, exhaustion, and the crushing weight of sustained combat operations. This wasn't a normal deployment. This was maximum tempo, day after day, with almost no margin for error. 12-hour shifts that became 18. No announcement, no choice, just the next launch cycle. Catapult crews launching jets every minute, arresting gear teams, catching them minutes later. The deck never went cold. The hangar bay became a machine that never stopped moving. These are the sailors this audience respects most, the ones who make it look effortless on the outside, while carrying the entire mission on their shoulders. What the headlines missed entirely. The real enemy wasn't just fatigue, it was the constant threat of escalation. Air defense networks were lighting up. Small vessels began probing the strike group's outer perimeter. Adversary aircraft made aggressive approaches. Every launch cycle had to be perfectly timed. One mistake, one delayed recovery, and the entire shield could fracture. The pressure inside Combat Information Center was electric. Watch officers made split-second decisions that balanced the air plan with emerging threats. One wrong call could turn a covert operation into an international incident. Deck crews worked in heat, noise, and constant danger. Jet blast that can drop a grown man to his knees in under a second. Heat, force, and noise combined into something that never becomes routine. Aircraft inches from moving bodies. Sleep reduced to fragmented 90-minute blocks. Yet the launches never slowed. You could see it in their eyes. That quiet pride mixed with bone-deep tiredness. They knew the mission depended on them staying sharp, when every instinct screamed for rest. The sonic shield wasn't sustained by technology alone. It was held together by young Americans who refused to let their brothers and sisters down. There were moments that will never make official briefings. A Growler crew nursing a jet back on near-empty tanks. A Hawkeye crew that held their orbit long past the scheduled recovery window because the deck wasn't ready. Moments where the entire operation balanced on the quiet professionalism of sailors, whose names will never make the headlines. Yet they held the line. They turned exhaustion into endurance, noise into cover, pressure into performance. And because they did, the special operations teams racing toward Caracas completed their mission, without a single shot fired in anger. This is what modern naval power really looks like. Not impressive hardware in a press release, but incredible Americans who make the impossible routine. The sonic shield held. But its true strength was never measured in decibels or sorties. It was measured in the people who refused to let it fall. And so the sonic shield did more than enable one capture. It proved a new way of operating in an era where every move is watched, and every watcher can be overwhelmed. Off Venezuela, the U.S. Navy didn't hide in the shadows. They filled the sky with purpose. They turned raw power into precision cover, and in doing so, they changed the calculus of littoral operations forever. These sailors showed us what American naval power truly means in the 21st century. The deck crews who never stopped moving. The pilots who flew until their bodies had nothing left. The operators who held the shield when everything else was shaking. Not louder for the sake of noise, but loud enough to protect what matters. The sonic shield wasn't just about masking a mission. It was about controlling the story the adversary sees, about giving commanders options they didn't have before, about proving that presence, properly orchestrated, can be the ultimate form of stealth. This is the new reality of sea power, and it rests on the shoulders of the young Americans who wear the uniform today. So as new challenges rise across our hemisphere and beyond, one question remains. How loud will we need to get to stay one step ahead? The roar that hides the strike. That is the equation. And America's sailors have already solved it.